In the casino example presented in the first session, the point was made that winning at slot machines wasn't exactly random or purely chance. At the same time, the skill of the individual didn't exactly produce winners or losers either. What is going on to produce winners and losers is a complex set of circumstances largely determined by unseen forces in the background. As people enter the casino and start playing slot machines, they become part of the unseen background. As each person starts playing a slot machine, that person's gambling is immediately and continually entered into the statistical equation that determines how much should be won and lost by all players. But everyone who enters a casino and plays any game is showing some trust. They are confident that they might win, or somebody else there might win. There is some trust involved, or no one would play. Slot machine playing is such a complicated interaction that describing it is not possible in any brief way. Perhaps the best way to summarize it is that you have some odds of winning and greater odds of losing. But complicated backgrounds are found everywhere in real life. Perhaps an example that's easy to grasp is a newborn baby. When a newborn baby enters a home, the baby becomes part of the family structure. It becomes part of the overall background. The arrival of the baby will change things. That's the way it is. The baby produces all sorts of noises, smells, and other behaviors that are there to produce a reaction in the caregivers. If you don't understand how this happens, you've never been around a newborn. When a person enters a new job, that person becomes part of the total worksite background too. For the moment, we'll not delve deeper into this, but it's important that you realize it. But there's a far deeper aspect to this that will probably surprise you. Think for a moment about a flower seed. What potential is inside it? If it falls to the ground and takes root in the earth, and it receives sufficient water and light, what will it become? You know the answer. It sprouts and becomes a flower. It follows the genetic blueprint encoded in its DNA. And if all the other needed environmental factors are present, it becomes what it is programmed to become. Rose seeds produce roses. Violet seeds produce violets. Flowers produce seeds that have the potential to produce more flowers. The presence of someone who cares for a flower can make it healthier and more productive. But if a flower gets more water or fertilizer than it needs, the flower won't do well. When a person lands in a job, the same can be true. Assuming the person in the job actually has the ability to do the job, external help at some ideal level greatly assists the person. But too little or too much help causes problems. Flower seeds have a purpose, a determined aim, an intention. In fact, everything has a purpose. The purpose of a flower seed is encoded in its DNA. The existence of a seed's DNA, its potential purpose, extends back into time through a chain of events that stretch to the first of its kind. But a flower can't pick up and move if it grows in an inconvenient place. And a flower probably never thinks about where it came from. If we can turn our attention to the bird world, Think about wren eggs for a moment. What they produce are wrens. It's encoded in the DNA housed in the egg. Over 3 years ago, a pair of wrens built a nest in the far upper corner of my garage during a period when I left our door open during the daytime. I was initially irritated when I discovered the nest, but when I counted an astonishing 11 eggs in it, I decided to let nature take its course. Gradually, the pair of wrens that built the nest seemed to lose all fear of us. One day I came into the garage and found small wrens hopping all over the place. Climbing a stepladder, I looked into the nest and found 5 newly hatched wrens waiting to be fed, and saw that all the eggs had hatched. Within days, there were small wrens perched in the bushes around the front of our house. The 2 adult wrens were frantically flying around, doing what they were supposed to do with each of their offspring. I managed to keep away neighborhood cats and place several of the small birds in higher bushes from time to time to keep them out of harm's way. I doubt that all 11 wrens survived, but I do know this. 3 years later, whenever the garage door is open, some wrens fly into the garage and go to the area where the nest was. When I see them and they see me, they don't have much fear and they just chirp. Throughout each year since then, wrens are everywhere around our house and they have little fear of us. They'll land within a few feet of us if there are any insects around. And each spring we find wren nests in bushes all around the house. Like a flower, a wren has a purpose, but the environment the wren hatches in, the background it enters, has a lot to do with its behavior. As wild birds, wrens have a built-in fear of humans, but given the right circumstances, a wren can overcome this fear and can probably have a better chance to fulfill its purpose. Unlike the flower, the wren can learn things and decide to move somewhere else if it chooses. It can also overcome some of its fears. It's the same in the entire animal world. All species have a purpose encoded in their DNA, but they also learn and also make choices. For example, bears have gradually lost their fear of humans, and they've learned to look for food in places where humans live. And animals develop distinctive personality characteristics. If you have any pets, you've come to understand the unique personality of each one. In the same way as with birds, a newborn baby has hidden possibilities and a purpose. There are amazing potentials encoded into human DNA. All humans are programmed through DNA to have their basic needs met and to learn. They do what they can to survive, and they learn by interacting with their environment. A baby doesn't learn to cry when it's hungry or uncomfortable. Crying behavior is built in and encoded into DNA so the baby can have needs met from the very start. But babies quickly learn what the effect of their crying is on their environment. That is, their crying usually leads to some form of reward or reinforcement. Someone feeds them, changes a diaper, or gives them warmth or comfort. This is a bit like the slot machine example. The baby performs a behavior that it comes to believe will lead to some payoff. The background a baby is in determines how much crying might be needed, or if there's any payoff whatsoever. Over time, they all develop into unique humans with abilities and personalities partly determined by their DNA and the unique environment. The purpose of this discussion is to introduce 2 issues that are important for you to consider: trust and acceptance. Chances are that you never saw those 2 issues coming, but both of them relate to a major goal in life: happiness. There are a lot of viewpoints and ideas about happiness, and there's no point in trying to mention all of them. There's a simple idea about happiness that we'll follow in this program. Happiness comes with doing the right things in life in the right way. We'll go deeper into what this means later, but for the moment, it might be easier to define what causes unhappiness. Unhappiness is related to defying one's purpose or by doing things in the wrong way. Unhappiness can come from resisting predetermined abilities, interests, and natural leanings toward the right path in life. It's a very individual thing because everyone is unique, and everyone grows up in unique circumstances that have a lot to do with their beliefs about the world and what they think about themselves. Unhappiness can also come from living your life in the wrong way. This is actually a simple idea. It means you have a genuine sense of what is right and what is wrong. When you violate your sense of right and wrong, an internal mental and emotional process takes place that blocks true happiness. The importance of trust and acceptance in all of this is critical. Trust is related to a form of confidence in something, a steadfast belief in something, and a lack of fear. The Wrens I mentioned earlier develop some trust in us despite it going against their nature. Every time you write a check, use a credit card, drop letters into a mailbox, go to work, or pay for gas or anything else in advance, trust is involved. But for happiness in life, you also have to trust some people and also trust a deeper part of yourself. In one way of looking at it, you have to have some trust in life, in your purpose. But lots of people don't trust life. They succumb to a seductive false belief. The false belief is this: we can't control how we lead our lives. Putting aside for the moment issues like accidents and serious illness, the idea that we don't have control over how we lead our lives is not really true. You might decide to allow others to make decisions for you, but you still made that decision. You can't control the background or circumstances you are in, but you can choose to leave the situation. You may not control everything that happens to you, but in one way or another, you usually control what you do from moment to moment. Just as true, however, is this: you cannot be anything you want to be. Now, I once accepted the idea that people could be anything they wanted to be if they wanted it bad enough. A specific event showed me this was not a good idea to impress on others. Some years ago, I heard a motivational speaker give a talk to a group of prison inmates housed in a mental health unit. The essence of the talk was you can be anything you want to be if you want it bad enough. Of course, the speaker stressed that wanting it bad enough meant that you had to work hard. After the talk, one of the inmates came to me and said he wanted to someday be a doctor, a psychiatrist. I was sort of stunned by the statement and simply asked him why. The reply from the 26-year-old inmate, who was mentally retarded, schizophrenic, and convicted of car theft countless times, was essentially this: the doctor has money and nice cars, and he's smart. The idea that the psychiatrist could somehow cure mental illness came up, but I can't recall exactly how the inmate worded it. I also can't remember precisely what I said to this inmate. I do remember talking to him about what sort of job he might be able to get so he'd have some money to buy the car he wanted. But it made me think about how, as a child and teenager, all I wanted to do was be a Major League Baseball pitcher. It was literally a 20-year obsession for me. In all honesty, no matter what I might have done, nor how much I worked and trained, it simply wasn't possible. My genetics determined my height and basic body characteristics. Work, practice, and training could improve my ability to a certain level, but there are physical limits created by DNA that no amount of work can overcome. I could throw a baseball well enough to be very good at a low level of competition, but never to what was needed for the major leagues. A torn shoulder muscle, something that seemed bad at that moment, ended the obsession. The point is this: if you think about your genetic potential as setting a purpose for you through predetermined strengths and weaknesses, then genetics sets up some correct paths to follow in life. At the same time, the unique background or the environment an individual is born into and lives in establishes paths that can lead to dead ends. But I also believe that the dead-end paths can help people understand things about themselves and lead to a better path. It's only been in the past 15 years or so that I came to really understand why I developed the baseball dream. It goes back to childhood issues involving family and my life circumstances. This understanding also made me revisit why I became what I am now. I remember starting to read psychology books when I was very young. I was basically bored with just about everything in school, but I was fascinated with psychology. And this discussion brings up two issues. First, an individual's genetic abilities, leanings towards certain things, and purpose in life usually show up quite early in life. Some people catch on to it right away. Others eventually get it, while some people never do. In general, an early interest in sports is seldom related to a genuine purpose in life. Secondly, most children develop a fantasy about themselves that competes with their real purpose. For me, baseball was the competing fantasy. A competing fantasy comes from competition with others and a person's specific life circumstances. Parental, sibling, and peer influence are part of the individual's life circumstances. People often speak about how having a life's dream is important and that a person shouldn't give up their dream. If the life dream is realistic and fulfills a person's purpose, then it isn't something that should be given up. But if it's a fantasy, it can get in the way of finding one's real path. Here's an example from today. A couple of years ago, a poll was taken of American children and teenagers, asking them to say what their life's greatest desire was. The most frequent answer was to become famous. They wanted to be on television, they wanted to be a pop star, a rap star, a sports star, a movie star, and be rich. It's understandable, of course, but not always realistic or always the right thing for individuals. The influence of peers and media create this fantasy, but it should be obvious that many famous people were destructive forces in the world. Being famous doesn't require doing what is right or helping others. Saying you want to be famous doesn't imply any morals, ethics, a sense of right or wrong, or helping anyone. Many mass murderers are famous, as are many white-collar criminals and people born into wealth. Fame, as a goal in life, seems to lend some personal sense of importance, but it doesn't necessarily imply anything good. In a world that can make a lot of people feel invisible and insignificant, fame can have a seductive appeal. A key issue in finding one's true path in life is acceptance or lack of it. Acceptance means recognizing reality, seeing the truth for what it is, and then acting responsibly. Some American Indian tribes call it true truth. It's the ability to put one's beliefs and hopes aside and see what is really there. It's often a complicated and difficult thing to achieve in life, but happiness depends on the ability to see the reality of ourselves and our circumstances for what they are. It's the ability to understand what we can control and change and what we can't. Acceptance and trust go hand in hand. Each requires the other. But underlying both of them is fundamental honesty. So the next part of this program briefly delves into trust and acceptance, but it's important that you be honest.